Hello YouTube, it's Carlos the Rook, and I'm coming at you with Game 2 from July Classic, played at Chess Zone, one of my favorite spots to play at. And in this round I'm playing, I can't pronounce his name, Baik Das, something like that. He's rated like 1550. So I start off with E4. He responds with E5. I get excited because maybe I'm going to get a Spanish game or possibly a Petrov defense. We're going to see. Knight F3, Knight C6, Spanish it is. I play Bishop B5, which is the signature of the Spanish game. I'm putting a pin on the knight and threatening to capture the knight and then take on the pawn on E5. But it's just a threat. It's not actually something I can do just yet because if I do that, the queen can come up when he recaptures with the D pawn. The queen can come up to D4 and hit the knight and the pawn at the same time. So I'm just building a threat and creating on that. And so black has to respond to that threat. So the normal response is A6. The bishop drops back to bishop to A4, maintaining a threat. Knight F6, hitting my E pawn. I castle. Bishop E7, blocking along the king file because the rook is coming to E1. Rook E1, B5. Now once the rook goes to E1, the threat, that pawn's protected, so the threat of capturing on knight on C6 and then taking the pawn on E5 becomes a reality. So black has to respond and get rid of my bishop. So B5 is a normal response here, beating the bishop back. The bishop retreats to B3, black castles. And here, black castling is not the normal move. The normal move is d6, which leads to the Shigorin. But because black castles, he's inviting me to play c3 with the intentions of playing the martial attack. So I can play the martial attack. I have theory for the martial attack and I have opening preparation for it, but I wanted to go into the anti-martial. So a4, black has two responses, b4 and bishop to b7. He responds b4, and I respond with the signature response of d4, hitting at the center. He responds d6, d captures e5, knight captures e5, knight captures e5, d captures e5. This is all theory. I move queen e2, and here he takes me out of prep because my prep is bishop c5 is the best move for black. He goes bishop b7, so I had to do f3. It was between because he's hitting the pawn twice. And if he takes the pawn with one of his minor pieces, my queen can't capture it back, even though I got two pieces on the pawn. And I didn't want to go knight to d2 and block my dark square bishop in. So f3 was the only logical move. Now he responds with bishop c5 check. I block it with my bishop. And he goes bishop d4, hitting at the b2 pawn. So I block with c3. Bishop captures c3. Now here I was wondering, should I capture back with the bishop? Because then if he captures my bishop on e3, queen captures back, his idea probably going to be queen d4 coming in and trying to trade queens with me. And it'll be a forced trade. Or do I take with the knight and keep my two pawns together and then target his weaknesses because he got two isolated pawns? Stockfish, let me see. Stockfish actually prefers knight captures c3, but on chess.com the engine prefers b captures c3. So yeah, Stockfish prefers knight captures c3, which is what I did. Knight captures c3. He captures on e3. I capture back with the queen, and now he bring queen to d4, wanting me to trade queens and bringing his pawn, his e pawn, onto the d4 file and giving him a pass pawn. I'm not doing that, and it's going to gain tempo on my knight. So instead, I'll bring a rook over to d1. If you want to trade queens, you can trade on my terms. I'm not trading on your terms. Queen captures e3, rook captures e3, and rook on a to d8. So he's trying to challenge me for the file, but the d file is mine. I go rook on e to d3, and Stockfish gives me a 0.61. It doesn't like this move. It's actually recommending rook to c1 with a 1.48 eval. And I did not understand this. This is just like counterintuitive for me. Like, why would you give up an open file? Like, everything in chess, they always teaches you in middle game, rooks belong on open files. If you read Jeremy Seelman's Reassess Your Chess, it'll say the same thing. Rooks belong on open files. But the big idea here is you want to target the weakness. This pawn is a weakness. So you want to double up rooks on the C file. The D file is meaningless when the weakness is here on the C file. So you doubling up rooks on the C file, bringing the knight maybe to D1 or E2, and then black has to respond with passive defense, protecting this C pawn. So that was the idea of what Stockfish wanted me to do. But I didn't do that. That just didn't make sense to me. But after it was explained to me that that was the idea behind Rook C1, then I understood it, and I felt like I should have been able to come up with that at the board. But that was a very complex idea. Rook captures D3, Rook captures D3. He moved Rook C8. Now I have control of the D file. The C pawn is a weakness, and I'm trying to find a way to target it. So my idea was to make a backwards knight move, which is very hard for intermediate and beginner players to see. My idea was knight to D1 to E3 to C4, and then I'll be targeting the pawn here. The knight can go this way, hitting the bishop, and it also can come this way. So it'll be multiple threats, and then I wanted to transfer the rook over to the C file and add pressure to the pawn. That was my idea behind the move. So I go knight D1. He goes G6 because he was thinking I wanted to go E3 with the idea of coming to F5. So I go knight E3. My idea is not F5. I'm playing on the queen side where the weaknesses are. So he plays A5, and here I didn't understand why he played A5, and I just missed his reply. And once again, this is an example of moving before you figure out why the opponent made a move. You should always understand what is it that my opponent wants. And then once you understand that, then you decide, do you need to counter it, or can you go ahead and carry out your own plans? So I didn't do that here. I just thought he made a frivolous move, which it wasn't. Stockfish wants Rook C3 here. Once again, pressuring that weakness. And it evaluates white position at 3.36 with rook to C3 being played. But I went ahead with my idea, knight C4, thinking, hey, I'm hitting both pawns, one of them is going to fall. But his idea behind A5 was bishop A6, hitting my knight. So now I play rook C3, which is the only move to keep the advantage, and it gives me a 1.72 advantage. He captures the bishop, and here I made a mistake. This mistake cost me gravely, because I'm supposed to capture back with the bishop with the idea of bishop captures C3, rook to B8, and B3. And I cement my bishop and pawn on the light squares. Then I can go over to bringing my king up. My king can move up along those dark squares. So my king can travel up this way after I cement everything on the queen side. And black has no real counterplay. He has two weaknesses, two isolated pawns, and I have my structure cemented. But instead of doing that, I play rook captures C4. And my idea here was to go to rook C5 and hit these two pawns. That was my idea, hitting the pawn this way and the pawn that way, just like my knight had did. But what I missed was rook b8. Now he's hitting at my bishop, and if I move the bishop, my b pawn falls. So I went rook to c3, protecting. He comes rook b4, invade into my territory. I go king f2. He goes knight d7. I go bishop d5, trying to increase the pressure this way. I'm giving up the pawn, trying to get some activity on the queen side. Rook captures b2 check. I go king g3. He go knight f6, and here I took a pause. I see a continuation for him. Knight to h5, maybe king h3 or king h4. I wasn't sure which way was correct. Knight f4 with the idea of rook captures g2 and him creating a mating net. But I thought I can get in before him with rook captures c7 with the idea of rook captures f7, and then the kings have to move out the way, and rook f8 check. That was my idea in trying to move my king, walk my king to h6, and then rook f8 mate. So it turns out his plan was faster than mine, and mine didn't work. So I went rook captures c7. He moved his knight over to h5 like I anticipated, checking. I stepped up to h4 because my idea is I want to go into h6. The rook takes, my rook takes, and he sidesteps me with king h8. I completely missed this move in my evaluation. King h8 just stepping out of the way of my discovered check that I'm about to hit him with. And if I go rook f8 now, then the king just steps up to h7, and then my king would never be able to get into f6, and I won't be able to do my mating net. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I messed up. And then as I'm evaluating this position, I'm like, I got to come up with something. So I go bishop e6 to offer some protection along the diagonal, the light diagonal, for when the pawn go up, my pawn can come up and my bishop protects it. My h3 pawn, my pawn can go up to h3 and my bishop protects it so he don't mate me on the h3 square. He moved knight f4, hitting the bishop, and what I almost missed, because I'm still trying to figure out how to get my king to h6, because he's not taking this h2 pawn like I wanted him to. I'm trying to figure out a way to get the king to h6 so I can drop my mate. But I almost missed what he has in this position is g5. If he moves g5, it's just mate. Like I sat here and thought about 20 minutes trying to figure out how to do this, how to do that, where to move the bishop to in order to maintain a mate net on his king. But it's my king that's in the mate net. And g5 is just killing because it'll be just mate. There'll be nowhere for my king to go. So when I seen g5, I was like, okay, I got to capture the knight and give up the exchange. So I capture the knight. He captures back. Move my king down, threatening the rook. The rook moves over there. I go king g4, protecting that pawn. He takes on h2. I take on f4. He moved king g7, bringing his pawn back in the game. I go e5 to keep his pawn out of keep his king out of f6, because I don't want his king getting over here. I got to pass pawn, and I got to figure out a way to promote. Rook e2, coming behind the pawn. I go bishop d7. That may have been a bad move, because I should have kept the king off of f7 and away from the action. He go to f7. I was thinking e6 check, but then king E7 comes, creating a blockade, and then my bishop can never leave the pawn. Even though I got these two pawns protected, he has a passed pawn on the H file, and I need the bishop to keep an eye on those pawns and keep them under control. So I drop back with the bishop. He goes rook e1. I go bishop c4 check. He steps over to e7. I go bishop d5. Just a waiting move. And he started moving his pawn on h5. I drop the bishop back to c4. He brings the rook over. He wants to push the g pawn. I bring the king down with the idea to come king f2. He goes back to e1. Check. I step back f4 with the idea of repeating the position and giving a draw by repetition. So he goes h4. And here I should have stepped over king g4 is what I should have did. That way my king could be over. I give up that pawn on the e file and take the pawn on the h file. And my f pawn is stopping rook e4 check grabbing my bishop. So I should have did that, and then I could have played against the g pawn with my f pawn. And I could have just locked my bishop onto, what is it, the b5 square. So I didn't do that. I went e6, and that was a game-ending move. He brings his rook back over to lock me out the file. So now he can just run his pawn up the board. I go king e3, h3. I move the pawn up, h2, bishop d5. He queens, I takes, and he take back. And that's completely devastating because I had a winning middle game, a winning position, and I didn't execute it properly. Because I didn't execute it properly, I ended up losing a game to a lower rated opponent, and that shouldn't have happened. So I just gotta study harder on my middle games, go into winning end games, and come up with winning themes. And I see a blind spot developing for me, not being able to find the best move for my opponent. I got to be able to find the best move for my opponent in order to calculate correctly. And that's something I'm going to work on and get better at. And thank you so much for watching this. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. It won't cost you anything. And I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you, YouTube. Have a nice day.